You're on the Bible Forum. We hear a lot today about climate change. I want to talk to you about true climate change. The God of the Bible declares himself omnipotent. He knows everything. He declares this to his people, to Israel. If thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kine, cattle, and flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, in all that thou settest thine hand unto for you to do, until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, and with a fever, and with the inflammation, and with the extreme burning, and with the sword, and the blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. The Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust, and heaven shall come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. And the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Talking to the Jewish people, Deuteronomy chapter 28. In another place, God said to his people, take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. And then the Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up the heaven, that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, lest she perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you. Deuteronomy 11. Here is the omnipotent power, the all-potent power of the one true God of this universe, the God most people reject, the God most people disdain and demean. God is telling us that he alone controls rainfall, causing floods and droughts. During the past centuries, global surface temperatures have increased slightly, erratically, but steadily, beginning about 1250 AD. Warm summers stopped being dependable. Think the Great Famine of 1315 to 1316. The Little Ice Age in the mid-1600s. Farms and villages in the Swiss Alps were destroyed by encroaching glaciers during the mid-17th century, 1600s. In the late 17th century, agriculture had dropped off dramatically. Alpine villagers lived on bread made from ground nutshells mixed with barley and oat flour. Historian Wolfgang Behringer has linked intensive witch hunting episodes in Europe to agricultural failures during the Little Ice Age. In Ireland, Catholics blamed the Reformation for the bad weather. We learn of our Revolutionary War in the 1770s, when the military suffered a great winter at Valley Forge. Scientists tell us this was the result of when the earth had been covered with water. Can you think of the Bible's flood? We read about it in the days of Noah, 1,000 years earlier. The residual effect of a great deal of water covering the earth, causing a great drop in temperature. Water evaporating into the atmosphere, cooling that atmosphere as it goes. Water gradually seeking its own levels here on the planet in various oceans, lakes, rivers, streams, revealing a greatly different topography, as well as extreme weather changes due to the amount of water. eventually leveling out after more than 1,000 years. At first, mankind benefited that warming trend, bringing longer growing seasons and milder temperatures. But then the heat brought diseases. Think of the various global epidemics coupled with a 50-year meteorological lull from 1910 to 1960, which helped produce greater worldwide agricultural yields at the start of the 20th century. By the mid-1950s, output had reached record levels. In the 1960s, we saw the birth of the so-called Green Revolution, spurred by a new hybrid seed, expanded irrigation, chemical fertilizers, pesticides that promised to alleviate world hunger. Then something unexpected happened. World climates became more volatile. Floods followed droughts. With growing frequency, indiscriminate tornadoes ripped through cities and farmlands. Hailstorms thrashed crops, and hurricanes lashed coastlines. The shift did more than merely becloud the promises of nonstop bumper crops underpinned by the agricultural miracles of the 1960s. It exacted steep costs in terms of economic losses, injuries, and deaths. And statistics show that this troubling trend has continued to get worse, particularly since the end of the 1980s. Within the United States, for example, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, we refer to it as FEMA, reported that in the 37 years between 1953 and 1989, an average of 23 major disasters were declared every year. In the 1990s, that average nearly doubled to 42. The decade that followed, 2000 to 2009, besides seeing that annual figure leap up again to 56, it brought some of the most destructive natural disasters in recorded history, all across the globe. Earthquakes alone killed more than 780,000 people and afflicted more than 2 billion others in one way or another. Globally, the number of catastrophic events more than doubled since the 1980s, according to the Center for Research on Epidemiology of Disasters in January of 2010. Insurance companies and meteorologists generally accept that the weather is becoming progressively more unstable. Human efforts to improve farming methods, forecast, and even manipulate the weather have redoubled. But in the end, these efforts are of no avail. What's going on? Is all this just an accident of nature? Well, whatever the cause, the trend has only gotten worse. More recently, in 2010, the year began in horrifying fashion with a catastrophic earthquake in Haiti on January 12 that killed hundreds of thousands of people and left over 1 million homeless. Deadly quakes also hit China, Indonesia, Chile, and Turkey. A typical year sees 16 earthquakes of at least a 7.0 magnitude. But in 2010, one of the most seismically violent in decades, saw 22. FEMA declared more disasters in the U.S. in 2010 than ever, nearly 2.5 times the annual average. The so-called peaceful years of 23 major disaster declarations in the U.S. seem to be over. 2010 saw 81 of them. A major disaster every 4.5 days. The term 100-year event lost its meaning this year, said Craig Fugate, head of FEMA. The weather system that summer swept through Asia, claiming nearly 17,000 lives, with a killer heat wave in Russia and epic flooding in Pakistan. The year ended with Eastern Australia drowning under its worst flooding ever, the local leading newspaper calling it a biblical disaster. Millions fleeing floods and landslides in Colombia and Venezuela. Record-breaking winter storms in Europe and North America. left many dead and homeless. Raging wildfires in Israel were considered the worst natural disaster in that nation's history. The world's biggest reinsurer, Swiss Re, estimated that worldwide, disasters in 2010 cost 3 times more than the year before, totaling nearly $250 billion. The Associated Press wrote, "This was the year the earth struck back." More than 250,000 people perished in nature-related disasters, more lives than terrorism claimed in the previous 40 years combined. But the disasters only got worse in 2011. Many more huge earthquakes, dramatic increases in tornadoes and severe flooding. These catastrophic events killed 1,000 Americans and caused $52 billion in damages. In the 1980s, the U.S. averaged just $1 billion disaster a year. In the 1990s, it jumped to 3.8 per year. And now, in the new millennium, it appears to be worse. Earthquakes in Argentina, Japan, Pakistan, Chile, floods in Brazil caused mudslides that left tens of thousands homeless, killed more than 700 people. In February, Queensland, Australia, still shell-shocked from flooding, got walloped by a massive cyclone. Then on February 22nd, an exceptionally violent tremor leveled much of Christchurch, New Zealand. Scientists say this severe of a quake strikes an average of once every 1,000 years. But not even 3 weeks later, a 9.0 quake hit near Japan, creating a killer tsunami that killed tens of thousands of people and caused a nuclear disaster. And the list goes on. Such catastrophes should, in fact, challenge our thinking. They force us to contemplate the fragility of mankind. They demand that we consider some deeper questions that we can all too easily ignore in the more prosperous and peaceful periods. But sadly, most of us don't glean any wisdom from these events, if we hear about them at all. And young people today seem to be oblivious to what's going on in the world. It's only in their social world, on their phone in hand, that they care about. Sometimes moving stories of heroism amid tragedy emerge, which some people use to exalt the goodness, the supposed righteousness of human beings. Others simply dig themselves out, curse the random cruelty of nature, and move on. Scientists, for their part, are searching for explanations within the natural world itself, particularly as disasters increase in frequency and lethality. There was a time when people, intellectuals even, would look at nature and see God. George Washington Carver wrote, "I love to think of nature as an unlimited broadcasting station, through which God speaks to us every hour, if we will only tune in." Ralph Waldo Emerson believed that the glory of the omnipresent God bursts through everywhere in nature. Today, any person bold enough to consider nature God's unlimited broadcasting station is mocked as a religious crackpot. And that's really too bad, because the Bible actually claims to pinpoint the causes of weather cataclysms and to forecast long-term weather trends. Could it be that God is indeed employing nature as his unlimited broadcasting station? And if so, are you paying attention? Are you ready? You see, the Bible is clear. This planet is not going to exist forever. Mankind will not destroy it. Natural disasters will not destroy it. One day, Jesus will call his children home. We call that the rapture of the church. In a moment of time, all the redeemed of the earth will just simply disappear. Hundreds of millions, billions perhaps, of people simply gone. Imagine the chaos, the fear, the speculation. Imagine what people will begin to think, how they will act, A great chaos will ensue, causing the world to want a global leader. Get this under control. Stop it. And of course, opportunists will move in against ancient enemies. Think about the Middle East, China, Russia. The Bible says a Western leader will arise to restore order. His form of order will be global domination and subjugation. The peace he brings will be bought with blood. The Bible indicates millions will die, dying simply for not accepting his authority. And in that, a form of peace will settle on the earth, an uncomfortable peace. And then Jesus will come. He will come out of the heavens with his bride, the church. And accompanying him, the Bible says, will be an angelic army, along with the redeemed of Israel and all those who went up before us. You can read about them in the Bible. And then, and only then, will there be peace. Peace brought about by absolute power. Peace brought about by the elimination of all who despise God, all who despise peace. And a wonderful 1,000-year reign of peace will ensue, broken by the release of God's arch enemy, a person we call the devil. He will gather his demons, and together with those who are not lovers of God, 1,000 years, no disease, no pestilence, everything just fine. They still don't like God. They'll join together to mount an attack upon God's authority, only to be soundly destroyed and forever chained in darkness. And then will come that period of time the Bible refers to as heaven. It's actually a new earth. The one we're on will be destroyed by God. And he will create a new earth and a new heaven, a new reality. And we will live forever. You ready for that? Now you might be a doubter, skeptic, a denier. You got a better plan?